This presentation covers Chapter 4 of They Say, I Say, which is called Yes, No, Okay, But. This presentation covers only the highlights of the chapter, so you should make sure that you read and annotate the chapter on your own as well, because you're going to need the skills that are discussed in the chapter for the writing assignment that we're going to start working on. The chapter just covers the basics of how to not only, now that you know how to summarize, but how to take that and respond to something that you've read, which is something you'll need to do in your academic life, but also in the workplace. So first, we're going to discuss 3 ways to respond. It's not that these are the only 3 ways, but these are the 3 most common and recognizable ways to respond to something if you're asked to read and respond to an argument, or perhaps to listen and respond to an argument. One thing that you can do is to agree or to say yes. A second thing you can do is to disagree or to say no. You can also agree and disagree simultaneously. So saying something like, okay, I see your point, but, or, okay, I disagree with that point, but I agree with another. So we're going to talk about those 3 different ways in this chapter and in class. Using one of these common and recognizable ways to respond is going to help people understand what your response is, because it's going to place it in a way that people have a typical way of understanding responses to arguments. So the first thing you can do is to disagree and explain why. When you respond, it's not enough to simply claim that you disagree. So when you respond to another person's argument or claims, it's not enough to just say, I disagree. You're also going to have to give reasons as to why you disagree. And not just reasons, but you have to make sure that they're persuasive reasons as to why you disagree. So providing a why you disagree with something allows you to prove you have something to contribute to a conversation or either at work or in the classroom. And it's going to help you participate by not just seeming stubborn and you disagree, but explaining why you disagree and helping to work out a problem. So there's some ways to disagree, and your book calls one response the duh response. And that sounds kind of brash and kind of rude. So you can think of it in your head as the duh response, but we're probably not actually going to say duh when we don't agree with someone. So the duh response, though, is disagreeing with the assumption that the information provided is a new or stunning revelation. So while it might be too brash to use the actual term duh, you might try something like, it's true that, but we already knew that. And we'll talk about how to do that in class with different kinds of arguments. Another thing that you can do is the twist it response, and this happens a lot in academic writing. You can often take someone's reason for their argument and twist it or switch it and turn it around and make it seem like it actually supports a different side of an argument. So we'll talk about how that works in class too. A second way to respond to an argument is to agree, but with a difference. So this is important. You can't just write a paper by saying, I agree, and repeating or parroting back everything that another author has said. Just like on the discussion board in class, you can't just parrot or repeat back what someone else has said. You can agree with an author's argument, but you're also going to need to add something to it. So you'll be joining the conversation by adding something new. So you're going to have to open up some slight difference between your position and the one you're agreeing with, or you're going to have to add a little bit something more to what you're agreeing with. You can't just copy what other people are doing. You can also agree and disagree simultaneously. So arguments are complicated. Things that people disagree about can be really complicated, and sometimes you'll find that you don't completely agree or completely disagree with someone. You might be in some sort of middle ground. So by agreeing and disagreeing simultaneously, you allow the people who are reading your argument or listening to your argument to easily place your opinion on a map of positions and still give you a way to respond thoughtfully. So there are some ways to do the agree and disagree, and we'll talk about these in more detail in class. The stress response is agreement and disagreement, but stressing the importance of one over the other. So I might say, I agree strongly with you on this, but I disagree on this minor point. Or I might say, I disagree with you strongly, but I will concede that you're right on this minor point. So you stress the agreement over the disagreement, or the other way around, stress the disagreement over the agreement. There's also a mixed feelings response, where you think about the pros and cons of a position without being decisively for it or against it. So in this way, you might point out that a person has some good arguments in favor of her argument and some bad, and that you're not coming down on either side yet. And there are templates for doing this in your book on page 65 and 66. So that ends the presentation of just the highlights from the chapter. You'll need to go over the chapter yourself, and you'll be working on it as we work on assignments throughout the semester. So this is a chapter that you'll be returning to.